in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. I was jolted awake by excruciating pain. It wasn't the kind of ordinary ache from a minor bump or scrape. No. This pain felt as though someone had dismantled my entire body piece by piece and then roughly reassembled it. Even the marrow deep within my bones throbbed with a dull, lingering agony. The red wedding candles had burned throughout the night. By now, nothing remained but a pool of twisted, hardened wax on the gilded candlestick, its vivid scarlet hue stabbing painfully into my eyes. I moved my fingers, lightly touching the priceless Yunjin brocade quilt beneath me. The cool, silky sensation that traveled up my fingertips reminded me all too clearly that the events of last night had not been a dream. Su Jin, the second daughter of the Su family, a girl who had never truly seen the light of day, had taken the place of my noble, legitimate elder sister, Suwan, and married into the Dingbei Marquis manor. This was the estate rumored to be a place that devoured people without spitting out even their bones. Rumors claimed that the young Marquis, Shi Heng, had a cruel and tyrannical temperament, suffered from a strange illness, and had stood on the wrong side during the struggle for the throne. Now, he was nothing more than a crippled invalid clinging desperately to life. Suwan had no desire to marry a dying man only to live out her days as a lonely widow, nor did she want to be implicated when the family faced the confiscation of their assets. That was why she devised this cunning scheme of substituting the plum for the withered peach. As for me, for the sake of having my mother's memorial tablet placed in the ancestral hall, and for the 1,000 taels of settlement silver, I had agreed and donned the red bridal veil. The heavy, intricately carved sandalwood door was violently pushed open from the outside, producing a harsh, grating sound. Morning light mixed with the chill of the late autumn snow swept into the bridal chamber, along with a group of people, instantly filling the festive room. The woman leading the group wore a formal wide-sleeved robe of deep purple without floral embroidery. A golden hairpin inlaid with kingfisher feathers adorned her hair bun, swaying with every step she took. This was my mother-in-law, the true mistress of the Dingbei Marquis manor, Madame C. Following closely behind her were two sturdy, strong older female servants. One of them carried a black lacquered tray with golden inlays. Atop it rested a white porcelain bowl from which curls of steam rose continuously. I forced myself to sit up. The quilt slid down, exposing my shoulders covered in dark red marks. Madame G's gaze swept over my body like a razor-sharp blade. It finally settled on those marks. A flash of disgust appeared in her eyes, but it was overshadowed by an even stronger, strangely relieved expression. She spoke, her voice icy and devoid of any warmth, as if addressing an inanimate object. "Since you've woken up, you should understand your own lowly position. Last night, the Marquis was not in his right mind, which is the only reason your insignificant body managed to receive a bit of favor." I lowered my gaze, putting on an appearance of complete submission. My voice came out slightly hoarse as I replied softly, "Madame is correct in her teachings." Madame C seemed highly satisfied with my sensible attitude. She waved her hand and Wang Momo, who stood behind her, stepped forward carrying the tray and looked down at me with haughty arrogance. The medicine in the bowl was pitch black and emitted a nauseatingly strong, pungent odor mixed with an indistinct metallic, raw stench. She announced that this was a contraceptive decoction. Madame C seated herself gracefully on the Grand Master's chair and leisurely stroked the protective nail guards on her fingers. "Your status is far too humble to be worthy of carrying the bloodline of our Marquis manor. Moreover, the Marquis's health is poor right now. We cannot allow any problematic seeds to be planted at this time. Drink it. It will benefit everyone." I stared at the bowl of pitch black medicine and laughed coldly in my heart. The day after the grand wedding, the mother-in-law personally forcing her daughter-in-law to drink contraceptive soup. If this news spread, the storytellers in the capital would have enough material to entertain people for 3 whole months. Yet not the slightest trace of grief or indignation showed on my face. Instead, I calmly raised my head and looked straight into Madame Z's eyes. "If I drink this, will I be allowed to leave afterward?" Madame C was visibly stunned for a moment, clearly not expecting me to be so straightforward. She had prepared a full belly of threats and temptations, but now they had nowhere to be used. She gave a cold snort. "You really are sensible." From her sleeve, she pulled out a thick stack of silver notes and casually tossed them onto the bed. The notes scattered and fluttered down onto the red wedding quilt like a surreal snowfall. "Here are 30,000 taels. I know you married in your sister's place. Now that the matter is settled, take the money and return to your countryside home. Remember this well. Keep everything sealed tightly in your stomach. To outsiders, you are only to say that your blessings were too thin, and you could not bear the wealth and honor of the Marquis's manor, so you requested to leave of your own accord. 30,000 taels. To my father, who only knew how to cling parasitically to the Su family's riches, this amount was enough for him to sell 10 daughters. To Su Wan, it was merely pocket money for a few pieces of jewelry. But to me, it meant freedom, starting capital, and the foundation to build my own life and destiny. I did not shed the tears of humiliation she had anticipated, nor did I kneel and beg to remain in the Marquis' manor to enjoy its riches and glory. I reached out and picked up each silver note one by one. My movements were slow and extremely meticulous. I gently blew on each one to remove any clinging scent, then folded them neatly and tucked them securely into my inner clothing. Madame C frowned deeply as she watched my actions and scolded. What a pathetic wretch who's never seen money in her life. I replied indifferently. Madame is right. I grew up in the countryside, so I truly have never seen this much money before. Only after confirming that the number of silver notes was correct did I shift my gaze to the bowl of medicine. Wang Momo was growing impatient and urged me, hurry up and drink it. If it gets cold, the medicine will lose its effectiveness. I lifted the steaming hot bowl. The porcelain burned my fingertips painfully. I brought it close and took a sniff. That fishy stench rushed straight into my nose. In that instant, fragments of memories from last night flashed through my mind. In the darkness, the young Marquis, who was rumored to be violent and foolish, had gripped my wrist tightly. His large hand was scorching hot, his fingertips bearing thin calluses from years of sword practice. He panted heavily beside my ear. His voice was suppressed with pain, yet at the final moment, he had used his finger to write a hidden character onto my palm. I kept my expression unchanged as I pulled my thoughts back. Looking at Madame G's harsh face, the corners of my lips lifted into a perfectly proper and gentle smile. Thank you for bestowing this medicine upon me, madam. Having said that, I tilted my head back and drank the scalding, fall medicine in one gulp. The burning liquid flowed down my throat like a trail of fire, scorching all the way into my stomach. I flipped the empty bowl upside down for Wang Momo to see. Not a single drop remains. The contempt in Madame G's eyes grew even stronger. She stood up and looked at me as if I were nothing but garbage. Consider yourself sensible. The carriage is already waiting at the rear gate. Don't take anything with you. Everything here belongs to the Marquis' manor. Change back into the clothes you arrived in and get lost. I stepped down from the bed, enduring the discomfort in my body. I removed the magnificent wedding robes and changed back into my old, shabby green dress and skirt. The moment I walked out of the bridal chamber, the sunlight was so blinding that my eyes stung. The maids and older servants sweeping the courtyard and trimming the plants all paused their work. They assessed me with mocking, theater-like gazes. Whispers and gossip buzzed around my ears like swarming flies. Look at that. This is the second daughter who was so greedy for wealth and glory. Driven out after just one night. I heard she got a huge sum of money. Truly a lowly creature who sold her body for glory. What man would want to marry a woman like this in the future? Her life is as good as ruined. I straightened my spine and walked forward with my eyes fixed straight ahead through the corridor. They were right. I was a greedy, lowly person. But what they didn't know was that the lowliest people often had the hardest spines. When I reached the Chua gate, I couldn't help but turn back for one deep look at the main residence known as Tingtao Courtyard. Sai Heng, the man who had written a character on my palm last night, was probably lying on that wedding bed right now, pretending to be dead, wasn't he? 30,000 taels to buy one night with me, and conveniently helping him remove a massive problem. This transaction was not a loss for me at all. I touched the stack of warm silver notes against my chest, then placed my hand over my still, burning stomach. Madame C thought this was contraceptive soup, but she had no idea that this bowl of medicine, if sold on the black market, would be worth 1,000 gold pieces and still hard to obtain. I withdrew my gaze. A cold smile curved my lips as I strode out of the rear gate of the Dingbei Marquis' manor. The prosperity and glory of this capital, I could not keep it today. But one day in the future, I would make every one of you beg for my return. The carriage departing from the capital had been arranged by Madame C. The driver was a one-eyed old man with a fall and stubborn personality. The carriage itself was extremely rundown. Every time the wheels rolled over a stone, it creaked so loudly it set one's teeth on edge. It felt as if my internal organs were about to be shaken out of place. The old driver up front shouted and cracked his whip viciously, seemingly intent on shattering every bone in my body. I curled up in the corner of the carriage, using some old clothes as padding behind my back. My hands unconsciously protected my lower abdomen. The carriage compartment reeked of damp mold and age, yet I found this smell far more bearable than the heavy incense of the Marquis Manor. The journey from the cattle to my hometown of Lioshu village took 2 full days and nights. When the carriage finally stopped before the dilapidated archway at the village entrance, I had to cling to the carriage door just to stand on my feet. It was midday. Under the large locust tree at the village entrance, many villagers were holding bowls of rice and chatting idly. Seeing the carriage arrive, they immediately started gossiping excitedly. "Isn't that old Sue's second girl? Why has she come back now? Wasn't she supposed to have married into the capital to become a noble madam? Look at that broken-down carriage. It doesn't look like a madam's return at all. She must have been driven out." Cask, I knew a sparrow could never become a phoenix. I heard she married as a substitute for her legitimate sister. She was definitely discovered and sent packing. These unrestrained discussions reached my ears without the slightest restraint. The driver jumped down, threw my small bundle onto the ground, and said impatiently, "We're here. Madam instructed me to deliver you, and I've done my duty with full conscience. In the future, don't even dream of returning to the capital. That's not a place for the likes of you." With those words, the old man didn't spare me another glance. He turned the carriage around and drove away, leaving me choking on a mouthful of dust. I brushed the dust off my clothes and bent down to pick up my bundle. Auntie Lai from the Lee family, the biggest gossip under the locust tree, immediately shuffled over with her bowl in hand. Her slanted eyes scanned me from head to toe as her mouth spat sarcastic words. "Why did the girl come back all by herself like this? Where's your husband?" The women beside her covered their mouths and giggled. "Auntie Lee, you don't understand these things. Rich families have so many rules. Who knows what mistake she made to be punished and sent home? What mistake? Her body probably isn't clean anymore." These vicious speculations poured over me like dirty water. I slowly raised my head. My cold gaze swept across these familiar yet strange faces. This was the place where I had lived for 16 years. Poverty and backwardness reigned here. But the hearts of the people were not necessarily purer than those in the capital. In this place, if a woman's reputation was destroyed, the pain was worse than death itself. Unfortunately for them, I was not an ordinary woman. "Move aside," I said. My voice was not loud, yet it carried a bone-piercing chill. Auntie Lee was silenced by my stare and unconsciously took half a step back. I paid no more attention to these people and walked straight toward the western side of the village. There stood a dilapidated 3-room tiled house, the only legacy my mother had left me. It was also where I had lived before being taken away. I pushed open the creaking courtyard gate. Wild grass grew rampant in the yard, reaching up to half a person's height. Spiderwebs covered the eaves, and more than half the window paper was torn away. Yet, an unprecedented sense of peace washed over me. I closed the courtyard gate firmly, shutting out the prying and malicious eyes from outside. Only then did I finally let out a long breath. After entering the house and clearing a relatively clean spot, I sat down. By now, the burning sensation in my stomach had completely vanished, replaced by a strange warmth that continued to gather toward my lower abdomen. I raised my right hand and took my pulse on my left wrist. The pulse beat powerfully and vigorously, like pearls rolling across a jade plate, smooth and fluent. Not only were there no signs of poisoning, but a potent and domineering medicinal force was nourishing my meridians. In particular, my uterus was being fortified layer by this energy. As expected, the medicine Madame C had given me was not a contraceptive decoction at all, nor any poison. It was Thai decoction, a top-tier secret medicine specialized in protecting the fetus and strengthening its foundation, a formula that had been lost for many years. The medicinal properties were extremely intense. Ordinary people who drank it would suffer abdominal pain as if their insides were being cut apart, mistaking it for an abortifacient. In truth, the medicine was forcefully clearing the meridians and creating the strongest possible protective barrier for the unborn child. Even if the mother fell from a great height or suffered severe injuries, as long as she had consumed this decoction, the child would remain perfectly safe. This prescription was extraordinarily rare. If I had not been the sole successor of my maternal grandfather and read through his collection of ancient medical texts since childhood, I would likely have been deceived as well. A woman entrenched deep in the inner courtyard, like Madame She, could never have known of this medicine, let alone been kind enough to give it to me. The decoction had definitely been swapped. Who could have switched the medicine right under Madame Z's nose at that moment? Besides the young Marquise, Si Heng, who was pretending to be mad and foolish, who else could it be? I rubbed my palm, still able to feel the lingering warmth from his fingertips. That hidden character had not only instructed me to endure, but also to take his bloodline and hide away with it. He knew I was a substitute bride. He knew Madame C would never accept me. So he used this method to protect both me and the child. What a profoundly calculated plan. I let out a soft laugh, unsure whether I was praising him or myself. 30,000 taels of silver, plus 1 life, and a child who'd very well be the sole heir of the entire Marquis Manor. Si Heng, the chessboard you've set up is truly grand. Since you dared to make this move, I dare to accept it. I stood up and took out the stack of silver notes from my bosom. 30,000 taels. This was an enormous fortune. In this remote place, an entire family of 5 would only spend about 5 taels of silver in a whole year. I had money, but I could not flaunt my wealth. In a village that had no laws, only clan rules, a lone woman carrying such a large sum was no different from a child walking through a crowded market holding gold. It was simply asking for death. I needed to quickly convert this money into something others could neither take nor steal. I straightened my clothes, washed my face, and stepped out of the courtyard once again. This time, I headed straight for the village chief's house. The village chief was sitting at his door smoking a water pipe. When he saw me approach, he didn't even bother lifting his eyes. The Su family girl just returned. You know the village rules. When a married daughter comes back to live here, she must pay a fee. I cut him off, pulling a 5-tael silver ingot from my sleeve and gently placing it on the small table in front of him. I want to buy land. The village chief's eyes immediately lit up. The pipe nearly dropped from his mouth. He picked up the silver, bit it to test its purity, and his attitude did an instant 180-degree turn. His wrinkled face bloomed into a wide smile. Oh, which piece do you want to buy? The good fertile fields at the village entrance. I shook my head and pointed toward the barren mountain behind my house. I want to buy that mountain. The village chief stared at me as if I were an idiot. That's a ghost mountain. It's covered in jagged rocks and wild grass. You can't even grow crops there. What do you want it for? That mountain was infamous in the village as worthless land. The soil was dry and hard, filled with strange protruding rocks. Besides a few types of tough grass that no one wanted, nothing could be planted there. I replied calmly, my fate is tough, so I only like tough things. I casually fabricated a story. I was driven back and don't have much money left. I can't afford good farmland anyway. That mountain is cheap and I want some peace and quiet. Turning my back to it will also spare me from hearing the villagers' gossip. The village chief eyed me suspiciously for a few moments, clearly calculating how much money I actually possessed. That mountain may be barren, but its area is quite large. He rolled his eyes and began raising the price. 50 taels. I stated my offer directly. 50 taels for the entire barren mountain and the wasteland at its base. The deed must be completed today. 50 taels to buy a worthless mountain. To the village chief, it was like a heavenly pie falling right into his lap. Fearing I might change my mind, he tapped out his pipe with a loud clack. I'll take you to the county Yemen right now to handle the transfer. Holding the freshly sealed land deed with its bright red stamp, I stepped out of the Yemen. By now, the sky had already grown dark. I stood at the foot of the mountain, gazing up at the barren peak that everyone else considered worthless land. Only I knew that hidden beneath that seemingly desolate layer of dry, barren rock lay a special type of mineral deposit. This kind of land was a dead end for growing grain, but if used to cultivate a few special medicinal herbs, it became the most unique and precious plot in the entire world, especially the golden thread bone, connecting grass that grew among the steep cliffs. It could reconnect shattered bones and regenerate flesh, worth 1,000 gold and nearly impossible to obtain. This was not merely a mountain. This was the very first bronze wall and iron barrier I, Sujin, was building for myself and my child in these turbulent times. When night fell, Luoshu village grew deathly still, broken only by the occasional bark of a dog. I lit a tiny oil lamp no bigger than a soybean and sat before the old wooden table. In my hands I held a rusty iron shovel, sharpening its edge bit by bit with slow, deliberate strokes. Outside the window the wind howled, yet I knew other sounds were hidden within that gale. From the moment I had stepped back into the village, I had sensed it. On the locust tree at the entrance and in every shadowy corner of my courtyard walls, a pair of eyes had been watching me without blinking. It was not the idle curiosity of the villagers. This was cold, professional surveillance. Someone trained. Someone sent by Suwan. My so-called kind elder sister had driven me back to the countryside, yet she still could not rest easy. She feared I would refuse to accept my fate. She feared I would speak recklessly. Most of all, she feared that one day, if that damned Shiheng truly died, I would return with some damning evidence and stir up endless trouble. That was why she had dispatched her spies. The moment I showed the slightest sign of discontent or my life showed even a trace of improvement, what awaited me would surely be a perfectly arranged accident. I blew out the oil lamp. A cold, mocking smile curved my lips. If she wants a show, then I'll give her one she'll never forget. Early the next morning, as the sky had only just begun to lighten, I shouldered the rusty iron shovel and climbed the mountain. I wore the most ragged coarse, cloth clothes I owned, my hair deliberately messy, and 2 streaks of soot smeared across my face, looking exactly like a forsaken woman forced to reclaim wasteland simply to survive. Villagers passing by pointed and whispered, "The Sioux family's second girl has gone mad. What is she doing up on that pile of jagged rocks, truly inviting disaster upon herself? She was the young madam of the Marquis Manor and didn't want it. Now she's come back to dig stones instead." I ignored every word. Head lowered, I worked with fierce determination. Sweat poured down like rain as I dug through the rocky soil. My palms quickly blistered and bled, yet I did not stop. Every swing of the shovel looked like reckless hoeing, but in truth I was meticulously surveying the soil and locating the earth veins. My maternal grandfather had once taught me that all things possess spirit, and medicinal herbs were especially picky about where they grew. Golden thread bone, connecting grass loved deep shade and extreme cold. Its roots plunged deep underground, drawing nourishment from the hidden underground springs. The rear face of this barren mountain never saw sunlight year-round, and faint moisture constantly seeped from the cracks between the rocks. An ideal growing environment. I spent 3 full days scrambling across the mountain. Those watching eyes stared at me for 3 full days. On the 4th day, the spy must have finally concluded that I was nothing more than a discarded woman with no way back and a mind that had clearly gone astray. Only then did the surveillance withdraw. The moment the feeling of being watched vanished, I tossed the iron shovel aside, sat heavily on the ground, and let out a long breath. The blood blisters on my palms had burst, sending bone, deep pain shooting through my hands. I took out a small porcelain bottle from my bosom. The jade skin ointment my maternal grandfather had left me. I scooped out a bit of the clear salve and applied it to the wounds. The instant cooling sensation chased the pain away at once. "Grandfather," I murmured, staring at my mud-covered hands with a bitter smile. "If you saw me like this, you'd probably scold your unfilial granddaughter." My maternal grandfather had been known throughout the Jianyu as the ghost doctor. His medical skills were godlike. He could snatch a person back from the king of hell himself. Yet his temperament had been eccentric. He only ever saved those with whom he shared karmic affinity, and he had strictly forbidden his descendants from using medicine for personal gain. Before my mother passed away, she had sewn several ancient medical texts he left behind into my pillow. She had warned me 1,000 times to hide them well. "A girl who is too clever invites disaster, not blessings," she had said. This medical knowledge was only to be revealed when my life was at stake. Never otherwise. I had remembered those words for all 16 years of my life. In the Sioux family, I had played the fool, the most inconspicuous second miss, allowing Suwan to bully me and my father to ignore me. Because I knew the moment I revealed my true abilities, I would become nothing but a tool for them to squeeze dry until not a drop of blood remained. But things were different now. I placed a hand over my still, flat belly. "I have a child now. I must live on. And I must live well. I must live so brilliantly that everyone else has to look up at me." This skill was now my sword and my shield. I stood up, dusted myself off, and my gaze grew firmer than ever. Since the spies had withdrawn, my plan could finally begin. I avoided the main paths and circled through the dense forest behind the mountain, returning with a full basket of what looked like ordinary wild grass. These were wild bone, connecting grass, ordinary quality, with only 30% of the medicinal effect I needed. My task was to use grafting techniques and soil modification to cultivate them into golden thread bone, connecting grass 10 times more potent than the common variety. This herb was a divine medicine for sword wounds and broken bones. The war at the border was growing tense. Although the imperial court kept the news tightly sealed, from Madame Ji's words and the unmistakable scent of blood that clung to Shi Heng, I could guess the north was about to erupt in battle once more. Once war broke out, this medicinal herb would become strategic war material even more valuable than gold. And across the entire world, only I knew the secret method to grow the supreme, grade golden thread bone, connecting grass. For the next half-month, I lived a life of inverted days and nights. During the day I was the pitiful abandoned woman, struggling on the barren mountain to survive, planting a few turnips and cabbages to fool the world. At night I became the true successor of the ghost doctor. I used the mountain's unique terrain to channel underground spring water and concoct special fertilizer. I severed the roots of the wild bone, connecting grass, soaked them in my specially prepared medicinal solution, then planted them into the prepared rock crevices. The work was painstaking, the slightest carelessness would cause the seedlings to wither and die. I tended these sprouts as carefully as if they were my own children. One morning half a month later, I was inspecting the medicinal field with my basket when, behind a massive boulder, I saw a flash of tender green that made my heart tremble. The seedlings were only as tall as a thumb, yet the edges of their leaves shimmered with faint golden threads that appeared and disappeared under the morning light, fragile yet stubbornly radiant. Success! I nearly cried out in excitement. My heart pounded violently. These were not merely herbs. They were silver power, the very foundation that would allow me to stand tall in this life. Just as I was drowning in joy, a sudden burst of frantic shouting rose from the foot of the mountain. Help! Someone help! Is anyone there? Save my life! It was Auntie Lee's voice, raw and broken with tears. I frowned, quickly covered the seedlings with a handful of dry grass, then grabbed the basket beside me. Pretending I had just finished work, I hurried down the mountain. The moment I reached my courtyard gate, I saw Auntie Lee with her hair in disarray, kneeling on the ground and cradling a 5 or 6-year-old child in her arms. Her precious grandson, Huzi's eyes were tightly shut, his face a terrifying shade of blue-purple, his breathing so weak it was almost undetectable. His limbs twitched occasionally. A circle of villagers stood watching, but no one dared step forward. Someone fetch the spirit medium. One person cried. This looks like a ghost has taken him. Another shook his head. I'm afraid it's too late, look at that black face. Auntie Lee's voice had gone hoarse from crying. Where is the doctor? Where is Dr. Wang from the village entrance? Someone said Dr. Wang went to town to buy goods. He won't be back in time. Hearing this, Auntie Lee collapsed onto the ground in utter despair, wailing, Huzi, my grandson. You want to take your old grandmother's life with you. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my gaze falling on Huzi's neck. There was a swollen red patch with a tiny black spot in the center. The surrounding skin had already begun to rot and fester. He had been bitten by a venomous mountain viper. This was an extremely potent neurotoxin. Once the venom reached the heart, if not treated within half a watch, death was certain. Save him or not, if I saved him, I would expose my medical knowledge and invite endless trouble. If I did not save him, this innocent child would surely die. Auntie Lee might have a sharp tongue, but her heart was not evil. The day I returned, although she had gossiped, she had secretly left 2 fresh eggs at my door afterward. My fingers brushed the pouch of silver needles hidden against my chest, the inheritance from my grandfather I had never let leave my side. Move aside, I said, pushing through the crowd. Auntie Lee looked up through tear-filled eyes, saw it was me, and froze. Jinner. If you want him to live, shut your mouth. My voice was cold and left no room for doubt. I knelt down. With one hand I tore open Huzi's collar. My fingers moved like lightning, sealing several major acupoints on his chest to lock the venom inside and prevent it from spreading further. Then, under the shocked gazes of the entire crowd, I drew out a set of gleaming silver needles. I twirled and inserted them with movements as fluid as flowing clouds and running water, as swift as lightning. First needle, Renjiang. Second, Yangquan. Third, Tanzhong. The moment the 3 needles sank in, Huzi's twitching body suddenly went still. Then he let out a loud cry and vomited a mouthful of pitch black blood. The blood was foul-smelling beyond words. Wherever it splattered, the grass withered instantly. As the black blood left his body, the terrifying blue-purple color on Huzi's face visibly receded. His weak breathing gradually steadied and grew stronger. The entire place fell deathly silent. Every single person stared at me with eyes wide as copper bells, as if they were looking at a monster. Auntie Lee's mouth hung open so wide she forgot to cry. I expressionlessly withdrew the silver needles, wiped them clean on Hugh Z's clothes, and tucked them away. The venom has been forced out. He won't die. I stood and looked down at Auntie Lee, my voice still indifferent. Go home and cook him a bowl of mung bean soup with a bit of licorice. Have him drink it for 3 consecutive days, and don't let him run wild on the mountain anymore. With that, I turned and left, leaving behind a cold, straight back. Behind me, Auntie Liv finally reacted. She suddenly threw herself to the ground and kowtowed toward my retreating figure with loud thuds. Living Bodhisattva. Divine Physician Su, you are the great benefactor of the entire Li family. My footsteps did not pause, but the corner of my mouth lifted slightly. The first step in monopolizing a technique was not making money. It was building prestige. From this day forward, in Lushu village, no one would dare call me the abandoned woman again. They would have to call me Divine Physician Su. The title, Divine Physician Su, was like a massive boulder thrown into a still pond, stirring up 1,000 ripples across Lushu village. Yet I understood perfectly well that fame could be both a protective talisman and a death warrant. If I were merely an abandoned woman with empty hands who suddenly possessed peerless medical skills, what awaited me would be the imperial family dragging me away to become a slave concocting pills. Therefore, before I possessed enough power to protect myself, I had to keep the title of Divine Physician within a very delicate range. Just as I had predicted, after I saved Auntie Li's grandson Huzi, the broken-down gate of my courtyard never knew peace again. Before the morning mist had even dispersed, knocking sounded at my door. Though not the noisy clamor I had imagined, the knocks were careful, almost ingratiating. I draped a thick cotton robe over my shoulders and opened the door. Standing outside was Auntie Lee. Behind her stood Huzi, his face still pale but able to stand on his own. Auntie Lee carried a basket covered with a blue cloth, the faint scent of fresh eggs and old hen soup wafted out. The moment she saw me, the face that usually only knew how to curse instantly wrinkled into the brightest smile, brighter than if she had seen her own mother. She rubbed her hands together awkwardly and shoved the basket into my arms. Fresh eggs and an old hen that doesn't lay anymore. Take them to nourish your body. Then she urged Huzi, kowtow to your benefactor. Huzi obediently tried to kneel. I reached out and steadied him firmly. My strength was not great, but I used clever technique so the child could not lower himself no matter how hard he tried. That's enough, Auntie Lee, I said, refusing the basket. I stepped aside and gestured. Come in. Auntie Lee's face lit up with delight. She quickly pulled Huzi into the courtyard. The yard was still overgrown with wild grass, but the area beside the well had been cleared. Several bamboo trays of drying herbs were laid out, filling the air with a pungent yet strangely reassuring medicinal scent. I motioned for Auntie Lai to sit and poured her a bowl of plain water. The remaining poison in Huzi has been cleared. Just continue giving him mung bean soup on schedule. I went straight to the point, having no interest in circling around. Auntie Lee, you didn't come today just to bring eggs, did you? Auntie Lee froze for a second, then her face showed a mix of embarrassment and the sly smile of someone caught. She glanced around, lowered her voice and said, Divine Physician really is like a living immortal. Nothing escapes your eyes. The truth is, Wang Mazi from the eastern end of the village went chopping wood the other day and fell, shattering the bones in his leg. The doctor in town said the leg has to be amputated, but after hearing about Huzi, his wife begged me to come ask if you could help. I lifted the bowl of water, gently blew away the surface foam, and did not answer immediately. Seeing my silence, Auntie Lee grew anxious and hastily added, Don't worry, the medical fee won't be short. Wang Mazi's family isn't rich, but they can still scrape together a few strings of cash. I set the bowl down. The porcelain clinked crisply against the wooden table. I raised my eyes and looked at Auntie Lee with a calm yet piercing gaze. Auntie Lee, we are both smart people. There's no need for vague words. I saved Huzi because the child was innocent, but I am not running a charity, and I do not save just anyone. Auntie Lee shrank back under my stare, the hairs on her neck standing up. Then, what does Divine Physician mean? I can save Wang Mazi, I said. In fact, from now on, anyone in the village who suffers headaches, falls, scrapes, or minor injuries, I can treat them all. My fingers tapped lightly on the table, the rhythm slow yet filled with pressure. But I have one condition. Auntie Lee answered instantly, just say the word. If I can do it, the entire Lee family will jump into boiling oil or fire without hesitation. I don't need you to jump into fire. The corner of my mouth lifted in the tiniest arc. I need that clever mouth of yours to work for me. Auntie Lai instinctively clapped a hand over her mouth, face full of alarm. I smiled faintly. I want you to speak on my behalf. I am a woman who was driven out of the Marquis' manor. My reputation is not good. The gossip in the village may not bother me, but it is still annoying. Auntie Lee was clever. She understood instantly. She slapped her thigh with a loud smack, her competitive spirit flaring. Whoever dares speak ill of divine physician, I'll be the first to tear their mouth apart. And that's not all. I turned, picked up a handful of dried brown grass roots from a tray, and held them out to her. Tell the villagers that I learned medicine because, while serving the old madam in the Marquis' manor, I received pointers from a reclusive expert. I only know how to treat minor scrapes and a few common ailments. I am not some divine physician. I do not want people from outside the village constantly knocking on my door. Understood? Auntie Lee nodded vigorously. Understood. Hide your wealth. Hide your skills. Let only those inside the circle know. Don't let outsiders enjoy the fat meat. I pointed at the barren mountain behind the house. I have already bought that mountain. I need to hire workers to clear the land and plant medicine. I need strong, quick-handed men with tight lips. 30 wen per day, paid daily. You will choose the people. If anyone slacks off or leaks information, you will be held responsible. Auntie Lai's eyes sparkled. In this poor village, 30 wen a day was an extremely high wage. Even carrying sacks all day in town only earned 20 wen, and that didn't include meals. This was a huge windfall. If she became the manager, wouldn't her status in the village soar like a kite in the wind? Divine Physician Su. Ah no, Miss Su, you can rest easy. Leave this matter entirely to me. After seeing Auntie Lee off, I watched her hurried, excited figure and knew I had chosen the right pawn for this opening move. Although Auntie Lee had a big mouth, people like her were the easiest to control. As long as I gave her enough benefits, she would become the most loyal watchdog guarding my gate. With her charging fearlessly into the battlefield of village gossip, I could free my hands to focus on the truly important matters. That afternoon, I changed into an unremarkable set of gray men's clothes, pulled a bamboo hat low over my eyes, shouldered a basket of herbs, and set off for Qing Town. I was going to meet my very first business partner, the largest medicine shop in Qingtown, Rengson Hall. The shopkeeper was a man over 50 surnamed Chen, commonly known as Manager Chen. He was greedy for profit yet extremely principled in his dealings. As long as there was money to be made, he would even do business with the devil himself. The moment I stepped into Rengson Hall, Manager Chen was examining a shriveled ginseng root through a magnifying glass, his face full of disgust. I lowered my voice to a neutral tone and asked if he was buying herbs. Manager Chen didn't even lift his eyes. Ordinary herbs go to the back door and find the assistant. We only accept top-grade goods here. I replied that what I was selling was precisely top grade, then set my basket down, took out a small packet carefully wrapped in oil paper, and placed it on the counter. Manager Chen opened it with indifference. The next second, his hand trembled violently and the magnifying glass nearly dropped to the floor. Inside the oil paper lay a plump, full medicinal herb. Though the leaves were dry, faint dark golden veins shimmered across them. He jerked his head up and stared at me in shock. This is golden thread bone connecting grass, and it's supreme, grade wild quality. I answered calmly, not wild. I cultivated it. Manager Chen nearly shouted, impossible. Bone connecting grass dies the moment it leaves the soil. It cannot be cultivated at all, let alone this supreme variety with golden threads. This only grows on the shaded face of sheer cliffs, and takes over 10 years to form. I shrugged, wrapped the herb back up, and made to take it away. If Manager Chen doesn't believe me, I'll simply ask across the street at Huichun Hall. He lunged forward and grabbed my wrist with shocking strength. His merchant's smile instantly bloomed across his face. Little brother, don't be hasty. I never said I didn't believe you. How much do you have? Right now, only this packet. Price: 100 taels. Manager Chen yelped, 100 taels. Are you robbing me? Yet his eyes never left the packet. He knew perfectly well that if this supreme bone, connecting grass reached the capital and was sold to high-ranking nobles or the military, even 300 taels would have people fighting over it. I remained unmoved. Manager Chen is a man who recognizes quality, so I won't haggle. Not only does this reconnect bones, it regenerates flesh. Paired with my exclusive formula, wounds close in 3 days and broken bones knit in 10, 100 tails is no loss at all. Manager Chen stared at me for a long time, weighing the pros and cons. Finally, he gritted his teeth and agreed, but demanded I promise to sell this herb exclusively to his shop in the future. I nodded, then added my own condition. He must never reveal that he purchased it in Qingtown, nor disclose my identity. Every half-month, I would send someone to deliver the goods. Money and goods changed hands cleanly. He happily accepted, took the 100-tal note, and I walked out of Rengson Hall. I didn't return home immediately. I stopped at a blacksmith shop to commission a batch of specialized farming tools, then bought large quantities of rice, flour, oil, and salt at the grain store. I hired a cart and headed back to Liushu village. By the time I reached the village entrance, the sky was pitch black. Auntie Li was already waiting with more than a dozen strong men. The moment they saw the goods on my cart, every pair of eyes lit up. Auntie Li stood with her hands on her hips like a proper steward. Listen up, everyone. As long as you work well for Proprietor Su, this will become the rice bowl for the entire village. Anyone who dares slack off. Don't blame me for being heartless. I looked at the mixture of awe and greed in the men's eyes and felt not the slightest ripple in my heart. 100 taels of silver was merely the beginning. What I was sowing on that barren mountain was not just herbs. It was the sharp blade that would one day let me demand justice from that enormous Marquis Manor. Yet I never expected the first pot of gold to arrive so quickly, nor the trouble to follow just as fast. Time slipped through my fingers like sand. In the blink of an eye, 5 months had passed since I returned to Liushu village. My belly had grown unmistakably round. The curve could no longer be hidden. Fortunately, it was now late winter turning to early spring. Thick clothing concealed it, and I rarely went out. Aside from Auntie Li and the core workers, almost no one in the village could get close to me. Even if someone noticed, Auntie Li followed my instructions and spread the word that I had simply gained weight or suffered from some abdominal swelling. After all, I carried the title of divine physician. If I said I was ill, then I was ill. The barren mountain that everyone once scorned had completely transformed. A 2-meter-high thorn fence now encircled its base, leaving only a single wooden gate guarded day and night. The jagged rocks had been terraced into neat steps. Irrigation channels snaked across the slopes like veins. The dry yellow weeds of the past had been replaced by rows of dark green medicinal herbs. My improved golden thread bone, connecting grass, nurtured by my special fertilizer and grafting techniques, the herb that originally required a 3-year growth cycle, now matured in just 5 months, and its medicinal effect was a full 30% stronger than the wild variety. Today was the first large-scale harvest. I sat inside the newly built wooden cabin halfway up the mountain, warming my hands by a small brazier, watching through the window as more than 30 villagers swung their sickles with eager care, collecting the golden, edged leaves. Joy of the harvest shone on every face, especially since I had just handed each of them a red envelope as a bonus for starting work. Auntie Li lifted the heavy door curtain and stepped in, bringing a gust of cold wind with her. Proprietor Su, the first batch has been weighed. 1,200 caddies in total. Following my instructions, she had already sorted them into 3 grades. She had grown completely accustomed to calling me Proprietor Su. I set the brazier aside and reminded her, when sealing the barrels, remember to use the special treated paper I prepared. It changes color if tampered with. Auntie Li nodded. Rest assured, I'm watching everything personally. Then she hesitated, clearly wanting to say more. I prompted her, if you have something to say, speak. She rubbed her hands together. Lately there have been some unfamiliar faces in town asking around about what we're growing on the mountain. A few even tried to bribe the workers to steal seedlings. But don't worry. None of them wavered. Everyone signed the confidentiality pledge with fingerprints. Whoever leaks information not only pays compensation until they go bankrupt, but also gets expelled from the clan. Right now, the entire village depends on you for their rice bowls. No one is stupid enough to smash their own livelihood for a one-time deal. I nodded. This was exactly why I had insisted on those iron-clad pledges from the very beginning. In this era where clan rules held absolute power, being expelled from one's clan was more terrifying than execution. Coupled with wages 3 times higher than anywhere else and the threat of severe punishment, the combination formed an unbreakable chain. Still, Auntie Li lowered her voice. I also heard, something big happened in the capital. My heart stirred. What is it? She shook her head. I didn't catch all the details, but the assistant at Manager Chen's shop said the North has truly gone to war. The Imperial Army is desperately short on medicinal supplies, especially external wound medicine. The market price for bone connecting grass has skyrocketed, yet there's still no supply. Many large shops in the capital have run out completely. Even the Imperial Medical Bureau is begging everywhere for stock. The corner of my mouth curved into a cold smile. Finally, the moment I've been waiting for has arrived. The essence of monopolizing a technique was never about what I possessed. It was about what others lacked and could not do without. I told Auntie Lee, go invite Manager Chen here. Tell him the goods he wants are ready, but the price needs to be renegotiated. Manager Chen arrived faster than a rabbit. He rode in a sedan chair straight to my wooden cabin. The moment he stepped down, he rushed inside, his old face blooming with smiles even as anxiety burned in his eyes. Proprietor Su, you are truly my living bodhisattva. Everything outside is in chaos, only you have stock. Quickly, give me that 1,000 caddies. I'll take it all. He offered 200 taels per caddy, double the previous price. I didn't move a muscle. I simply peeled a tangerine in silence and popped half into my mouth. The sweet, sour juice burst across my tongue. Manager Chen, that's not very generous of you, I said calmly. From what I know, even low-grade bone, connecting grass on the capital's black market is already selling for 300 taels. Mine is supreme, grade golden thread quality, offering me only 200 taels. Do you think a country woman like me doesn't understand the market? Manager Chen's smile froze. He smiled bitterly. Your information is too sharp, but transporting goods to the capital carries huge risks right now with soldiers and horses everywhere. I cut him off and named my price directly. 500 taels per caddy. He nearly jumped out of his skin. 500 taels. That's robbery. 500 taels. I repeated. And not only will I sell you the herbs, I'll also gift you a formula. I took a thin sheet of paper from my sleeve. This is an improved recipe for golden wand powder. When made with my golden thread bone, connecting grass as the main ingredient, the hemostatic and wound closing speed is 3 times faster than the military's current version. With this formula, Rengson Hall will no longer be a small shop, it can become a colossal enterprise that does business directly with the emperor himself. Manager Chen's eyes locked onto the paper. His breathing grew rapid. As an old merchant, he understood exactly what this meant. This was not merely money, it was a ladder straight to heaven. After a long silence, he gritted his teeth and slammed his palm on the table. I concede. Proprietor Su, you're not growing herbs, you're growing gold. The contract was signed. I watched Manager Chen's men carefully carry the sealed barrels away. I rested a hand on my swollen belly and whispered to the child inside. Do you see? Mother is carving out rivers and mountains for you. With this shipment on its way, the name Su Jin, or rather, Proprietor So, would begin to circulate in certain special circles. I was no longer the disposable second daughter. I had become the overlord who held the lives of countless wounded soldiers and an enormous fortune in my grasp. Yet I also knew that as wealth surged, danger would multiply at the same rate. 500 taels per caddy were enough to drive many people to desperate acts. Lately, suspicious movements had been appearing in the forest behind the mountain almost every night. These were not ordinary petty thieves. From the sound of their footsteps, they were professionals. I had increased patrols and even scattered my specially made poison powder outside the fence, but it still wasn't enough. I needed stronger martial power to protect what was mine. Just as I was considering whether to spend gold hiring an escort agency, the shadow that had always lurked in the darkness finally revealed itself. A night of high wind and dim moonlight. The perfect time for murder. The wind tonight was fierce, rattling the window paper and masking many sounds that should not have existed. My sleep had grown light ever since I became pregnant, my senses were razor-sharp. Beneath my pillow lay a short poison-coated sword. On the bedside table sat a jar of lethal powder that killed on contact with blood. Whoosh! A tiny sound of splitting air pierced through the gale. My eyes snapped open. My body instinctively rolled toward the inner side of the bed. Thud! A pitch-black arrow slammed into the exact spot I had just vacated, its shaft still quivering. If I had been half a breath slower, I would have been nailed to the bed. Immediately afterward, chaotic footsteps and suppressed shouts erupted in the courtyard. Move in. The woman has tens of thousands of taels in the formula. Master ordered us to keep her alive for questioning. Kill everyone else. Professional assassins. Their tone was not that of bandits seeking money, but clearly aimed at my technique. I calmly sat up. I neither screamed nor panicked. I swiftly donned my specially made soft armor vest, strapped the short sword to my wrist, grabbed a handful of medicinal powder from the bedside, and leaped out the rear window. Outside, flames lit up the sky. Those bastards had actually set fire to my medicinal fields. Watching the entire mountainside burn, my heart bled, yet my eyes grew even colder. These animals weren't burning grass, they were burning my heart's blood, my very life. They were courting death. I ground my teeth and prepared to charge out and trigger the traps I had planted in the fields. Suddenly, a group of black-clad figures surged out of the darkness without warning. They wore tight-knit fighting clothes, iron masks with no patterns, and the long knives in their hands reflected a cold, bloodthirsty light under the flames. Like asuras crawling up from hell, they were silent, efficient, and lethal. Without a single unnecessary word, they swept over the arsonists like a black tide. Screams erupted one after another, then abruptly cut off. It was a one-sided massacre. The arrogant assassins who had come to kill me became nothing more than lambs waiting to be slaughtered before these black, armored guards. They had no power to resist. In less than the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the battle ended. Dozens of corpses littered the ground, fresh blood dyeing the mud a shocking red under the firelight. The leader of the black, armored guards wiped the blood from his blade, turned, and looked straight toward the large tree where I was hiding. "Miss Sue, you may come out now." His voice was hoarse with a metallic edge. I gripped the short sword tightly and stepped out slowly. Under the firelight, I clearly saw his attire. Although there were no obvious insignias, the jade plaque at his waist was one I had seen before. These were the elite private soldiers of the Dingbei Marquis Manor, the profound Iron Guards. Troops that only the successive Marquis could command. I asked coldly, "Did Shi Heng send you?" There was not the slightest trace of gratitude or tears in my voice. The leader seemed slightly surprised by my composure. He sheathed his blade, bowed slightly, and spoke with meticulous respect. "Shadow One, at your service. By the young master's order, I have come to protect you completely." I pointed at the still, burning medicinal fields. "Protect me completely. If you had arrived half a moment earlier, my fields would not have been set ablaze." Shadow One fell silent for a moment, then replied. "The young master said, without experiencing life and death, one does not understand fear. Mrs. Business has grown too large and attracted too many flies. This is merely a lesson to teach you that money alone cannot protect what you own without blades to back it up." I laughed in anger. "Shi Heng, you're truly something." He had always had people watching me. He knew someone was about to strike, yet he deliberately waited until the fire was raging before making his move. He was warning me, and at the same time, showing me his power. Without his protection, I was nothing but a piece of fat meat waiting to be carved up. "Tell him I accept his kind intentions," I said, "but this debt, I will add it to his tab. The burned herbs will be deducted from the commission owed to the Marquis Manor." Shadow One did not argue. He simply took a small sandalwood box from his chest and offered it to me with both hands. "The young master asked me to deliver this." I accepted it suspiciously. It felt heavy. When I opened it, there was no gold or jewels inside, only several sets of tiny, neatly folded baby clothes. The fabric was the softest, most breathable cloud, silk tribute cloth, worth 1,000 gold per inch, perfect for a newborn's delicate skin. The stitching was exquisite, clearly rushed by the imperial seamstresses. Beneath the clothes lay a small, exquisitely crafted golden longevity lock. 2 characters were engraved upon it: peace and safety. My fingers trembled slightly. In that instant, I could almost see the man struggling in the abyss of the Marquis Manor, secretly preparing this on some sleepless night. Holding the longevity lock, my gaze grew complicated as I stroked it gently. He knew I was pregnant. He even knew I was carrying twins. This man was not by my side. Yet he seemed to know every detail of my life like the back of his hand. The feeling of being watched made me uncomfortable, yet I could not deny that this box softened my heart more than any amount of gold or silver ever could. "Is he still well?" I asked, my voice unconsciously gentler as I closed the box. Shadow One answered concisely, "The young master is still pretending to be mad, but Miss Sue may rest easy. The Marquis Manor will not remain in chaos much longer. The young master said you'd focus on nurturing the pregnancy and growing your herbs. Leave all the dirty, bloody work to us." With a wave of his hand, the profound Iron Guards moved forward with practiced efficiency, disposing of the bodies. Some even began helping extinguish the flames. Watching their busy figures, I touched the box against my chest and felt much of my resentment melt away. Si Heng, you truly are a bastard. But you are also the kind of bastard who makes a woman feel safe. Although tonight's raid cost me part of my medicinal fields, it also cleanly swept away the hidden dangers lurking around me. The various forces that had been eyeing me greedily lost all courage the moment they saw the mountain of corpses and the terrifying black, armored guards. Everyone now knew that behind Divine Physician Su stood a backer with sky-high power. The name Sujin had finally begun to cast a long, formidable shadow. My business only grew stronger with each passing day. The medicinal merchants who had once tried to force my prices down now lined up obediently at the foot of the mountain, each one more docile than the last as they clutched thick stacks of silver notes. Seizing this opportunity, I also began building my own private guard force. I selected 30 of the strongest villagers and placed them under the command of Auntie Li's son, Daniu. With the 2 military instructors Shadow One had left behind, they underwent rigorous, hellish training. I, Sujin, had never been willing to stake my entire fortune and life completely on another person, even if that person was the father of my children. The days continued to pass in a delicate balance of tension and prosperity. My belly grew heavier by the day, and my movements became increasingly cumbersome. Just when I thought I could peacefully await the birth, explosive news arrived from the capital. And it was news directed straight at me. Auntie Li rushed up the mountain in a frantic panic. It's bad. Several luxurious carriages have arrived at the village entrance. They claim to be people from the Marquis Manor who've come to offer prayers for blessings. They specifically demanded to meet the landowner here. My hand, which had been carefully pruning a potted plant, suddenly froze. With a crisp snip, I severed a blooming branch. The Marquis Manor coming to pray for blessings. At a time like this, traveling all the way to this remote, impoverished village, who else could it be but Su Wan, that woman who always acted with a guilty conscience? It seemed my so-called kind elder sister had finally tracked me down. I calmly set down the pruning shears, supported my waist, and stood up slowly. My gaze grew deep and unreadable. What's there to panic about? Since they've come, they shouldn't leave so easily. Danu ran up the mountain, panting heavily. The carriages are enormous. Every wheel is trimmed with gold. The guards' eyes are gleaming with excitement like hunters who've spotted their prey walking straight into a trap. I sat on a specially made soft couch, holding a small pair of scissors and slowly trimming a precious orchid. How many carriages in total, and how many people did they bring? 3 carriages. The lead one is the most extravagant. Over 20 mounted guards follow behind, all carrying long sabers and looking extremely fierce. Danu grinned mischievously. Just as you instructed, Auntie Li mixed the soft gold powder into the well water at the village entrance last night. The first thing those people will do upon entering the village is drink water and water their horses. They won't be able to run away. I snipped off a wilted flower with a light, graceful motion. Well done. How are things arranged on Auntie Li's side? Everything is prepared. Every single person in the village, young and old, has turned into an actor. Right now, the entire village truly looks like a poverty-stricken hellhole. Aside from our mountain, every other place is so poor that even rats would take a detour. I put down the scissors and struggled to my feet. Let's go. It's time for me to meet my dear elder sister. So Wan's carriage stopped in front of the village chief's house. Even in this remote countryside, she maintained the full airs of the young madam of the Marquis Manor. A red carpet had been rolled out from carriage so that the village dirt wouldn't soil her embroidered shoes. I stood in the shadows behind the crowd, my bamboo hat covering half my face, silently observing the entire performance. So Wan stepped down from the carriage wearing a magnificent long dress of fairy red gold, embroidered brocade. Her head was adorned with lavish jewelry, and her face was covered in thick powder, making her appear stunning and domineering. However, one glance would enough for me to notice something wrong. Although her waist was deliberately widened by her clothing to conceal it, her posture and steps were far too light and graceful. A woman supposedly 5 months pregnant could not possibly maintain such a steady lower body or walk with such ease. She was faking her pregnancy. She sneered disdainfully at the rundown surroundings. Does this broken village not even have a single cup of hot tea? Her sharp, ear-piercing voice rang out with extreme arrogance. Where is this so-called proprietor Su? Why hasn't he crawled out to welcome me? The maid courier beside her trembled as she offered a cup of tea. This is a poor village. We only have coarse tea. Please make do with it to moisten your throat, young madam. So-won viciously slapped the cup away. You dare serve this pig swill to me? She then demanded. Where is the water I brought? Kyer answered fearfully. The water barrel on the carriage leaked. There's only the well water from the village left. So-won raised her hand in fury to strike her, but was stopped by the middle-aged matron beside her. The woman whispered urgently. The main task is more important. We came this time for that medicinal herb supplier. If we can obtain this batch of bone-connecting grass, the young master's crisis in the army will be resolved, and your position will become rock solid. As for these country bumpkins, once we get what we want, there will be plenty of ways to deal with them later. So-won took a deep breath to suppress her rage. Her vicious gaze swept across the watching villagers. Go call that proprietor Su here. Tell him that the young madam of the Marquis's manor wishes to see him. This is already giving him immense face. At that moment, Auntie Lee pushed through the crowd with an ingratiating smile. May the noble guest be blessed with good fortune. Our proprietor is currently at the medicine shed behind the mountain. Since it's a medicinal planting area, outsiders are strictly forbidden from entering. Moreover, our proprietor has a rather eccentric temperament and her legs are inconvenient, so she cannot come down the mountain. So-won's willow brows shot up in anger. A mere countryside landowner dares to put on more airs than me. She immediately ordered, men, go up the mountain and drag that ignorant fool down here. The 20+ guards instantly accepted the command and charged aggressively toward the mountain path. Auntie Lee cried out in terror. You can't go up the mountain. There are traps and venomous snakes. But the guard captain kicked her aside and led his men straight up the trail. I stood in the shadows, watching everything with cold detachment. The traps and snakes were prepared for outsiders. But against someone like So-won, the best trap was her own arrogance. Before they had even run 30 meters, the men at the front suddenly collapsed as if their bones had been pulled out, crashing heavily to the ground. Like falling dominoes, the guards behind them also turned deathly pale, clutching their stomachs and groaning in agony. So-won screamed in terror. What's happening? Are there assassins? I slowly stepped out from the shadows. There are no assassins, young madam. I removed my bamboo hat, revealing my lightly made-up face and my prominently swollen belly. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, scattering across my features. Looking at So-won's face, which was twisted in extreme shock, the corner of my mouth lifted slightly. Elder sister, it's been a long time. The water in the countryside is quite hard. It seems your dogs aren't used to drinking it. So-won stared at me as if she had seen a ghost. Her finger trembled violently as she pointed at me. Su-jin, is that really you? You're not dead. Thanks to elder sister's blessing. Not only am I not dead, I'm living exceptionally well. I supported my waist and walked step by step toward her. Under Auntie Lie's lead, the villagers quickly formed a tight circle around us. Although they only held farming tools, their eyes carried a fierce glint honed from long training. The fallen guards tried desperately to draw their sabers, but discovered they didn't even have the strength left to grip the hilts. How does the soft gold powder feel? I asked calmly. Not very pleasant, is it? I glanced at the struggling guard captain. Don't waste your energy. The more you move, the faster the poison will spread. So-won finally reacted. She stumbled back 2 steps, her face completely drained of blood. Is it you? Are you the one monopolizing the bone, connecting grass? Was this entire thing your scheme? I let out a soft laugh. Elder sister, you're mistaken. In the beginning, it was you who forced me to drink that bowl of contraceptive soup and gave me 30,000 tals to get lost. I obediently left and used your money to build this small enterprise. Now that you see me living well, you want to come and rob me. She gnashed her teeth and shrieked. That was a favor from the Marquis's manor. Then she cursed me as a lowly wretch and ordered her men to kill me so the medicine would belong to them. Unfortunately, no one answered her call. Her pillars of support were now all lying on the ground like dead dogs, gasping for breath. I walked over without hesitation and sat down on the Grand Master's chair that had been prepared for her. Letting out a comfortable sigh, I said, Elder sister, save your strength. Right now, what you should be worrying about is not how to kill me, but how to keep that non-existent child in your belly. So-won's pupils contracted sharply. She instinctively covered her stomach. What nonsense are you talking about? I am a doctor, I said calmly. Moreover, I am the successor of the ghost doctor. I still have this much judgment. I pointed at her waist. Your pulse is empty and floating, your qi and blood are severely depleted, yet you keep forcing a false pregnancy pulse with medicine. Elder sister, the side effects of those fake pregnancy drugs are quite severe, aren't they? Do you suffer excruciating abdominal pain and bleeding every single night? So-won trembled violently. Cold sweat poured down her forehead as I struck her sore spot. Her voice shook as she asked desperately, "Can you cure it?" Her eyes were filled with despair, a trace of hope and bone, deep hatred all at once. I smiled like a compassionate bodhisattva, yet spoke the cruelest words possible. Of course I can cure it. But why should I? Back then, that bowl of scalding contraceptive soup nearly burned through my throat. Soo-won's expression shifted wildly, from fear and rage to greed and jealousy, finally settling into pure, frenzied madness. She ground her teeth and snarled, "Don't get too cocky. Even if my guards have fallen here, I still have a squad of cavalry waiting outside the village. One signal and they will charge in and massacre everyone here. Do you really think you've won?" I raised an eyebrow. "Then go ahead and send the signal. Try it." So-won immediately pulled out a signal flare from her bosom. Her hands shook as she tried to ignite it. Whoosh! A short black sword flew out from my sleeve and precisely severed the fuse. It also left a shallow cut across the back of her hand. Soo-won screamed in pain as the flare tube fell to the ground and rolled several times. "It didn't go off," I said coldly, blowing non-existent dust off my sleeve. My eyes were icy. "Elder sister, I already told you. The water in this countryside is very hard. Your cavalry is probably being treated to tea by my workers right now. I forgot to mention that I have sentry posts set up within 10 miles in every direction. Without my permission, not even a fly can fly in. This is true monopoly, not just over the herbs but over this entire territory. From the moment you stepped into Liushu village, you became a turtle trapped in a jar." So-won clutched her bleeding hand and finally noticed the villagers surrounding her. Their eyes were cold and filled with open hostility. At last, she realized the truth. This was no longer the Marquis's manor. This was Su-jin's territory. Her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the red carpet. Her expensive brocade dress instantly became stained with mud. Her voice trembled as she asked, What do you want from me?" I stood up and walked in front of her, looking down. "I don't want anything. Since you've come all this way, elder sister, why don't you stay for a few days? I'm about to give birth soon and am short on people to serve tea and water. Back then, I served you in the Marquis's manor for so many years. Now it's your turn to serve me." She screamed hysterically, "How dare you? I am the young madam of the Marquis's manor." I cut her off coldly. "Here, you are nothing." I ordered Kyre, "Help your master into the woodshed next to the pigsty. If she dares to escape or cause trouble, cut off her medicine supply." Kyre was scared out of her wits and didn't dare resist. She dragged the struggling Soo-won away. Even as she was being pulled away, Soo-won continued to shriek madly, "Si-heng will never forgive you for this." I watched her retreating figure and touched my belly, my gaze complex. Si-heng, if he knew she came here, he would probably only blame me for not burying her alive on the spot. But keeping her alive still had its uses. I wanted her to watch with her own eyes as I took away everything she was most proud of, bit by bit. The days Soo-won spent locked in the woodshed were the most comfortable I had felt in months. At first, she threw violent tantrums, went on hunger strikes, cursed nonstop, and smashed everything in sight, turning the dilapidated woodshed into complete chaos. I didn't indulge her at all. If she refuses to eat, then let her starve. Don't even give her water until she behaves. Auntie Lee asked worriedly, "Will this cause someone's death?" After all, she's from the Marquis's manor. People like her who love life and fear death are more afraid of dying than anyone else. I replied calmly. She's waiting for someone to save her. Sure enough, after starving for 2 days and 2 nights, Soo-won became completely obedient. She began wolfing down the coarse rice and vegetables she once wouldn't even glance at. She stopped cursing and huddled silently in the corner of the woodshed like a venomous snake, waiting for the right moment. She was waiting. And so was I. I was waiting for her final trump card to be played. I knew someone like Soo-won would never come with only this much ability. Since she dared to come, she definitely had a backup plan. Sure enough, on the 3rd night, the middle-aged matron who had always stayed close to Soo-won secretly crept toward the well behind the mountain. That night, the moonlight was dim. I couldn't sleep because of leg cramps and was sitting in the courtyard enjoying the cool night air. Shadow One appeared silently on the roof behind me. That old woman has poisoned the well. His voice was flat. What kind of poison? Stoneheart poison. My eyes turned icy cold. How vicious. She wants to poison the entire village to create an epidemic or an accident, then escape in the chaos while conveniently causing me and my 2 children to die. Have you already swapped it? I ask. Done. I replaced the stone heart poison with croton powder and added some of the knockout incense you prepared into the water bucket she brought back to the woodshed. I couldn't help but laugh softly. Shadow One, you're learning bad habits. Proximity to ink makes one black, he replied simply. The next morning, the village suddenly became lively. The matron, thinking the entire village had been poisoned, excitedly ran to report to Suwan. Believing her chance had finally come, Suwan led Kyer and the matron, clutching a hidden dagger, and charged out of the woodshed to kill me. The moment they rushed into the courtyard, they saw the supposedly poisoned villagers standing perfectly healthy, holding farming tools and looking at them like fools. Meanwhile, after only a few steps, Suwan and her 2 companions began to feel dizzy and staggered unsteadily. Suwan clutched the doorframe. What's going on? I pushed open the door and stepped out. Elder sister, weren't you going to ask why the stoneheart poison in the well didn't kill us? In my hand was the remaining packet of powder. Exactly what Shadow One had taken from the matron. Or perhaps you wanted to ask why you yourself fell for your own trap. Seeing the packet, the last trace of hope in Suwan's eyes shattered completely. She collapsed to the ground, her eyes filled with utter despair. You knew from the very beginning. In this village, even when an ant moves its nest, I know about it. I walked in front of her and crouched down. Your methods are too dirty, and too stupid. I can understand you wanting to kill me, but dragging the entire village down with you breaks the rules. She still stubbornly cursed, claiming she was the young madam of the Marquis Manor, and that she was the rule. I stood up. Here, I am the rule. With a wave of my hand I ordered, Auntie Lee, break the limbs of this poisoner and throw her out of the village. As for Suwan, I looked at her face, which remained vicious even in despair, and suddenly felt it was all rather dull. Killing her would be too cheap. I wanted her to live and watch as I took away everything she cared about most. Take her back to the woodshed. Nail the windows shut and leave only a small hole for food. Also, Auntie Lai, make her drink the medicine from this small porcelain bottle. Suwan asked in horror. What is that? The corner of my mouth curved into a devilish smile. A fetal stabilizing medicine. Elder sister, aren't you faking a pregnancy? This will make your pregnancy look completely real. Even the symptoms will be identical. But 10 months later, what you give birth to will be nothing but a pile of minced flesh and blood. I want you to return to the Marquis Manor with that big belly and, under everyone's expectant eyes, give birth to a monster. Let's see how the old madam, who values her bloodline above all else, will treat you then. This is true heart killing. Suwan finally understood. She let out a blood-curdling scream and lunged at me, trying to scratch my face. Auntie Li pinned her down and forced the entire bottle of medicine down her throat. She cursed me viciously, saying I would die a horrible death, that I was a demon. I smiled. Thank you for the compliment. Watching Suwan being dragged away, I touched my belly and felt exhausted. The child inside seemed to sense my emotions and kicked hard. I winced in pain and let out a soft cry, clutching my waist. Shadow One jumped down from a tree, tense. What's wrong? It's nothing. The little rascal is just being naughty. I smiled and was about to go inside to rest when a sudden, tearing pain exploded from my lower abdomen, as if my body was being ripped apart. My expression changed drastically. I grabbed Shadow One's arm tightly. It's not good. My water broke. I'm going into labor. I looked down. A large patch of my skirt was already soaked. Even Shadow One, a man who killed without blinking, panicked for the first time. It's only 8 months. Premature labor. Stay calm, I commanded. Call the midwife. Call Auntie Lai. Bring my prepared delivery bag and boil hot water, quickly. At the same time, the sky suddenly darkened. Thunder roared overhead as a torrential downpour began. The moment I was carried into the delivery room, an intense wave of unease surged through my heart. Premature labor in a storm, this was no coincidence. There had been something wrong with the tea I drank earlier. The little maid who always served me was normally an honest village girl, but that cup of tea had carried an extremely faint bitter smell. Labor, inducing medicine. Even though Suwan's locked up, She still had hidden pieces left in the village. The pain crashed over me like tidal waves. I bit down hard on the soft wooden stick in my mouth as cold sweat soaked through my clothes. Auntie Lee rushed in with a plump old woman. "The midwife is here." I forced my eyes open. This was not the Wang Momo we had arranged beforehand. It was a completely unfamiliar face. Auntie Lee explained hurriedly. "Wang Momo's family had something urgent come up. This is Lu Momo from the neighboring village. Her skills are also excellent." I stared at Lu Momo. Her eyes avoided mine, and her hands remained hidden in her sleeves. Her fingernails seemed stained with something dark. She was an assassin disguised as a midwife. "So Wan, my dear sister, you really left one final move." Using every ounce of strength I had left, I shouted, "Everyone get out. Auntie Lee, throw this midwife out." I refused to let her deliver my child. Auntie Lee panicked, unsure what to do. A murderous glint flashed in Lu Momo's eyes. Suddenly, she pulled out a pair of gleaming scissors from her sleeve and stabbed straight toward my belly. "If you don't want to give birth, then just die." I cried out in despair. Shadow One. But he was standing guard outside the courtyard. With the heavy rain and closed windows between us, no matter how fast his movements were, he could not be faster than the blade already inches from my body. The scissors were just an inch from my belly when, bang! The delivery room door was kicked clean off its frame. A black shadow flashed in like lightning. With a sickening thud, a long sword pierced straight through Lu Momo's chest, nailing her to the wall. Fresh blood sprayed across my face. I stared in a daze at the man standing before my bed. He wore all black, soaked to the bone, hair disabled and plastered to his face. His eyes were bloodshot, and he still gripped the bloodied sword in his hand. It was none other than the Dingbei Marquis, Si Heng. The man who was supposed to be playing the mad fool back in the capital. I couldn't believe it. Si Heng. He flung the sword aside and lunged to the bedside. His hands trembled as he reached for my face, then stopped, afraid the blood on his fingers would dirty me. "I'm here," he rasped, voice hoarse and shaking from the narrow escape. "Don't be afraid. I'm here now." In that instant, every wall of strength and pretense I had built crumbled beneath his gaze. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Si Heng, I'm giving birth. It hurts so much." "I know." He seized my hand without caring whether his own was clean, pressing it tightly to his face. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I know medicine. I'll deliver the babies myself. Our 2 children will be perfectly safe." Outside, thunder roared and rain lashed the roof. Inside, the air reeked of blood. Yet looking into Si Heng's frenzied yet rock-steady eyes, I suddenly felt safer than I had ever been in my life. The pain was endless. Every contraction felt like a blade slicing through my waist, crushing my organs. "Breathe with me," he commanded, voice low and steady by my ear, like an anchor in a sea of agony. He had already stripped off his sodden outer robe, wearing only a thin inner garment with sleeves rolled high to reveal powerful arms. Those same hands that had slain countless enemies now gently wiped the cold sweat from my forehead with clean cotton, then expertly checked my condition. 6 fingers dilated. "Good, you're doing wonderfully." As he spoke, he took a piece of ginseng from the medicine box I had prepared and slipped it into my mouth. "Hold it under your tongue. Don't bite." I stared at him. Gone was any trace of the noble young Marquis. His face was streaked with sweat and the assassin's blood, brows knitted into a deep frown. His gaze was terrifyingly focused, as if the entire world had vanished, leaving only me and the children in my belly. Why did you come?" I asked weakly. His hands never stopped moving, massaging my acupoints with special techniques to ease the pain. I felt uneasy. Last night my eyelids kept twitching. I sensed something was wrong. I couldn't rest. So I rode 3 horses to death and galloped through the storm all night to reach you. He had killed 3 horses and covered hundreds of miles in a raging storm, risking his very life to get here. I wanted to ask about the capital, but he growled softly, "Forget the capital. Even if the sky falls, I'll hold it up. Right now, just focus on giving birth." His voice cracked with rare panic. "If anything happens to you, I'll drag the entire Sioux family and the Marquis Manor down to the grave with us." This was the first time I had ever seen him lose control. The man who had always calculated every move, who had pretended to be mad, now looked as fragile as a child. A far more violent contraction slammed into me. Si Heng's face changed color. "The babies are breech. Twins, premature, and with the labor-inducing drug, they're tangled together. If I don't turn them now, we risk a difficult birth, or even 1 corpse, 3 lives." He looked at me, eyes filled with heart and ruthless resolve. Endure it. I'll turn them. It will hurt. Terribly. I gritted my teeth. Do it. As long as the children live, I'm not afraid of pain. He took a deep breath and placed both hands on my swollen belly. The next second, it felt as though I were being torn apart alive. His hands pressed through my abdomen, forcibly rotating the babies inside. The agony pierced my soul. I screamed, nails digging deep into his biceps, tearing the flesh. At that moment, the first baby's head was crowned. Si-Heng was drenched in sweat, voice trembling. Push. I felt my strength draining away, vision blurring. I can't, I'm finished. He suddenly leaned down and kissed me hard. The kiss tasted of blood, sweat, and desperate life. He poured his inner energy into me, along with his very will to live. Aren't you the one who wants to be the creditor of the Marquis Manor? He growled against my lips. Aren't you the one who wants those 30,000 taels? If you die, I'll burn every coin and give it to another woman. Our children will call someone else mother. Can you bear that? No. I was not willing. I had worked so hard to carve out this empire. Why should I hand it over to anyone else? A nameless fury and ferocious will to live exploded from the depths of my soul. My eyes flew open. I gripped the bedsheets with all my remaining strength and pushed with everything I had. Wah! A loud, healthy cry shattered the heavy air in the room, drowning out even the storm outside. It's the elder brother, a little rascal. Si-Heng cried with wild joy. He swiftly cut the cord, wrapped the wrinkled monkey like newborn in clean cloth, and placed him gently beside my pillow. But we weren't finished. One more remained. This one will be easier, he encouraged, gripping my hand and pouring strength into me. Moments later, a softer kitten-like cry rang out. It's the younger sister, Dragon and Phoenix twins. We have a daughter. He lifted the tiny girl. Tears mixed with sweat fell onto her swaddling cloth. Looking at the two tiny lives, my heart felt lighter than air. Exhaustion crashed over me like a tide. Remember, give me the money, I whispered. It's mine. Then I blacked out completely. Before unconsciousness claimed me, I seemed to hear his helpless, doting laugh and a low, solemn promise. Everything is yours. Even I am yours. When I woke, 2 days had passed. The rain had stopped and golden sunlight poured through the window. I moved slightly. My body was still sore and weak, but the tearing pain had vanished. Someone had cleaned me thoroughly. Beside the bed, a man was slumped over in sleep. Si-Heng. He wore a simple, clean green robe, hair tied back, stubble shadowing his jaw. He looked exhausted, yet radiated the quiet peace of a family man. One hand still clutched mine tightly. Not far away, in a cradle, our 2 babies slept soundly. I didn't have the heart to wake him. I simply watched his sleeping face in silence. Who could have imagined that the mad dog of the Dingbei Marquis, the man who made the entire court tremble, would one day lie here like a loyal hound guarding my bedside? Perhaps sensing my gaze, his lashes fluttered. The moment his eyes opened and saw me awake, they blazed with overwhelming joy, as if he had just recovered a lost treasure. Are you hungry? Thirsty? Does the wound still hurt? I shook my head, voice still weak. Why are you still weak? What about the capital? Shadow One has returned and is impersonating me. His disguise technique is excellent, and since I've always acted crazy, no one will notice if I stay in bed a few days. He paused, then added softly, as for Su-Wan. His hands stilled. A cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. The midwife confessed. Su-Wan hired assassins from the Blood-Clothes Tower with her own money. As for Su-Wan herself, he laughed coldly. I already had her sent back. I was stunned. You released her. Not released, he corrected. I followed your plan and let her continue the fake pregnancy. I also spread the news that you died in childbirth in the countryside. 1 life, 3 deaths. I understood his intention instantly. He wanted Su-Wan to believe she had won, to drop her guard and expose every ambition and ally she had inside the Marquis Manor. Meanwhile, I could stay here peacefully in confinement and focus on expanding my business empire. He pulled a thick stack of land deeds and account books from his chest and handed them to me. What is this? 3 estates around the capital and the 2 largest medicine shops belonging to the Marquis Manor. They all bear the Su surname now. Consider it a meeting gift for the children and betrothal gifts for you. I stared at the documents, then at him, teasing. You're really handing your entire life over to me. Aren't you afraid I'll take the money and run? He pressed his forehead to mine, breaths mingling. You can't escape. You are my medicine. We were born to be a pair of heaven-sent bandits. His voice dropped. The water in the capital is too muddy. Only when the 2 of us join hands can we stir the entire world. I looked into his eyes and saw my own reflection, plain yet burning with boundless ambition. Yes. Blades and medicine. Money and power. These were the strongest alliance and the longest confession of love. I gripped his hand tightly and smiled brilliantly. Then it's decided. I'll take 80% of the profits. He burst out laughing, leaned down, and kissed me. Everything is yours, including my life. Outside the window, the sky was clear and the breeze gentle. But the real storm in the capital had only just begun to brew. The news of a great victory at the border reached the capital on the very day I led a grand procession of carriages back to the gates of the Dingby Marquis Manor. Over the past year, thanks to my golden thread bone, connecting grass and the improved golden wound powder, Sai Heng had not only saved tens of thousands of soldiers but had also crushed the enemy in one decisive blow. From a crippled madman, he had risen to become the regent king, his power shaking the court. And I was no longer the disposable second daughter who had left in secret. I was proprietor Su, the woman who controlled 30% of the empire's entire medicinal herb trade. The main gates of the Marquis Manor stood wide open, yet I did not descend from the carriage. The woman once called Madame C, now addressed as Old Madam, stood at the entrance with a group of older servants. She had aged considerably, but her arrogance remained. She eyed the dazzling red betrothal gifts and the long trail of fragrant medicinal herbs stretching half a street behind me. Greed flashed in her eyes before her face darkened. "You've returned to the manor. Why haven't you gotten out and kowtowed?" she snapped. "Even if you gave birth to the eldest son, without proper etiquette you are still nothing. Kneel at the gate for one full watch to wash away the stench of a merchant from your body." The watching crowd pointed and whispered. I lifted the carriage curtain, cradling our daughter in my arms. Shi Heng held our son. We showed none of the fear she expected. Shi Heng stepped down first, then carefully helped me out. He didn't spare the old madam a single glance. Instead, he gently tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear and asked softly, "Are you tired?" I smiled faintly. "I'm fine." Then I turned to the old madam. "Kneel." I laughed lightly and pulled a thick ledger from my sleeve, tossing it at her feet. "Old madam, are you perhaps mistaken about something? Today I did not come to serve as a concubine. I came to collect a debt." She froze. "What debt?" "In the past year, to maintain appearances and to fill the bottomless pit of Su Wan's spending, the Marquis Manor secretly borrowed an enormous sum from the imperial treasury. You know exactly how much." I smiled. "That debt was mortgaged to my trading company long ago. In other words, the ground beneath your feet, the house behind you, even the imperial bestowed cane in your hand, now all belong to the Su family." She trembled with rage. "Nonsense. Whether it's nonsense or not, you can check the mortgage documents at the Ministry of Revenue yourself. I originally planned to leave you a place to retire in peace if you behaved. But since you insist on putting on airs, we'll settle this publicly and fairly." I waved my hand. "Begin the inventory. Everyone unrelated, leave." Behind me, dozens of accountants and hundreds of profound iron guards answered in unison, their voices shaking the heavens. The old madam's eyes rolled back, she nearly fainted. The power and rules she had always prided herself on were as fragile as paper before absolute capital. I stepped on the pile of ledgers and ascended the stairs without kneeling, only dominance. This Marquis Manor gate was very tall, but today, I stepped over it and walked inside. So Wan gave birth on the third day after my return, the same day the clan assembly was held. For an entire year she had used my medicine to force her fake belly to grow enormous, making everyone believe she carried the legitimate hair. Only I knew that inside was nothing but dead flesh pushed out by the drugs. In the ancestral hall, the clan elders gathered. So Wan lay on a soft couch that had been carried in. She was skin and bones, belly grotesquely swollen, face caked in thick powder, eyes wild and manic. "I carry the legitimate son of the Marquis Manor. I am a hero," she shrieked. "The bastard spawn of Su Jin has no right to enter the family register." The old madam, though provoked by me until she fell ill, still forced herself to sit upright. Su Jin's lowly birth. Who knows what man she slept with in the countryside. Today we must perform the blood drop test to verify parentage. Si Heng sat in the main seat, lazily playing with his teacup. The corner of his mouth curved into a bloodthirsty smile. "A blood test is necessary, but not for my children. We will test what is inside the young madam's belly." So Wan suddenly screamed in agony. The skirt between her legs was instantly soaked with black-red blood. The medicine had taken effect. The clueless midwives crowded around in panic. The entire hall fell deathly silent. Everyone stared at the screen. There was no infant's cry, only a midwife's horrified shriek. "It's a monster." A trembling midwife carried out a copper basin. Inside was no child, only a writhing mass of black-purple flesh emitting a stench so foul that several Klein elders vomited on the spot. Suwan stared at the basin, eyes bulging. She wailed for her child and cursed me for harming her. She tried to lunge at me, but tumbled off the couch and crashed to the floor. I looked down at her coldly. "I helped you, elder sister. A year ago you faked a pregnancy to fight for favor. Without me, you would have been exposed long ago. The year of glory and wealth you stole is now due for repayment, including your own mother." Si Heng stood and threw a stack of ironclad evidence into the old madam's face. "Suwan's fake pregnancy was secretly permitted by you, colluding with external enemies to sell military supplies, profiting from it. Even the poison that drove me mad back then was your doing. Each crime is enough to exterminate the entire Marquis manor to the 9th generation." The old madam stared at the damning proof, face ashen. The people on the seats stammered, unable to speak. Si Heng gave the order, "Out of respect for my late father, I will not kill you." So Wan was demoted to commoner status and imprisoned for life in the ancestral shrine. The old madam was sent to the Buddha hall behind the mountain to reflect and chant sutras. Without an imperial decree, she could never leave. Both the shrine and the Buddha hall were merely prettier prisons. As Suwan was dragged away, she continued to curse madly. I covered the twins' ears so they would not hear the filth. With everything settled, the Marquis manor became far cleaner. The old, rotten elements were swept away and replaced by my capable people. The once gloomy residence was now filled with medicinal herbs, the air carrying a faint, soothing fragrance. On a warm afternoon, sunlight poured into the study. Si Heng crawled on the floor, playing horse for the twins with zero dignity. The awe-inspiring Regent King was currently grinning like an idiot. Our daughter tugged his hair, giggling as she urged, "Faster, Daddy." Our son sat to the side, holding a medical text he couldn't read, imitating my page, turning gestures with the solemn air of a little old man. I sat on the soft couch by the window, clicking an abacus as I calculated this month's accounts. Si Heng crawled over with messy hair and buried his face in my lap, resting his cheek on my knee. "The Emperor mentioned again yesterday that he wants to confer upon you the title of first rank Imperial Madam," he said. "Wife, do you really not want it?" I didn't even look up, fingers still flying over the abacus. "That's just an empty name. The only thing it gets me is having to kowtow in the palace. It's useless. What I want is the Emperor's special edict allowing my medicine to be sold in the western regions." Si Heng chuckled softly, caught my hand, and kissed my palm. "You really have fallen into a money pit." He paused. "The world is already ours. Why are you still fighting so desperately?" I stopped the abacus and looked at him seriously. "The world may be yours, but the money is mine. Only what I hold firmly in my own hands is truly secure." I didn't want to be a vine clinging to him. I wanted to be the tree standing beside him. The Sujin of the past had calculated every step and endured humiliation just to survive. The Sujin of today had love, children, and above all, an enormous fortune and strength that no one dared to underestimate. Si Heng's eyes overflowed with doting affection. "If you want to be a tree, I'll be the earth beneath your roots. If you want to fly, I'll be the wind beneath your wings. In this lifetime, don't even think about leaving me." He took a rare peach blossom, out of season, and tucked it into my hair with a smile. "When the flowers bloom, prosperity follows. Our best days are still ahead." I touched the blossom in my hair and looked out the window. The golden thread bone, connecting grass in the courtyard swayed in the breeze, sparkling with golden light under the sun. It was not merely medicine. It was the brilliant, never-fading life of Sujin. The story ends here to remind every reader that love cannot be measured by favoritism and filial piety is never an excuse to dump burdens on one person. Unconditional endurance does not create harmony. It only breeds injustice. When your rights are violated, stay clear-headed, keep evidence, and use the law to protect your boundaries. Caring for family does not mean accepting sacrifice. To live truly is to dare to say, "Enough," when fairness no longer exists. The story of Su Jin teaches us that true power does not come from the protection of others, but from the strength we cultivate within ourselves. When thrown into the abyss, do not weep over the darkness, instead, use the stones cast at you to build a fortress. Society may label you, betray you, or strip you of your titles, but it can never confiscate your knowledge, resilience, or inner worth. Love and alliances are beautiful, but they are only secure when you stand as an equal. Never be a clinging vine. Choose to be a deeply rooted tree. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like,